Part 1. Quiet nights in the old apartment. I moved into the building in early autumn, the kind of season where the air feels thinner and sound seems to carry just a little farther down empty streets. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, the very end of a long, dim hallway. The rent was cheap. The neighbours mostly kept to themselves, and the walls were thick enough to muffle city noise. The hallway ended at a door I assumed was for maintenance. It was painted the same dull beige as the walls, no number, no nameplate. The deadbolt was old, the metal tarnished like it hadn't been touched in years. It looked unremarkable, forgettable. And for the first month, I barely thought about it. Most nights, I worked late. When I came home, the hall was quiet, except for the hum of the old fluorescent light above my door. I'd passed that unmarked door without even glancing at it. But one Thursday night, I stopped. I didn't know why. There was nothing unusual, just the same scratched paint, the same crooked frame. But I caught myself staring at the gap beneath the door. It wasn't completely dark under there. A faint strip of light bled into the hallway, the colour of a dying candle. I remember frowning because I had always thought it was just a locked storage room. I couldn't remember seeing that glow before. A week later I noticed it again. Same time, around 11:45 p.m. This time, I also thought I heard something, a soft drag like bare feet on a floor. I stood there listening, holding my breath until my chest started to burn. When I finally unlocked my own door, I tried to shake it off. Old buildings make noises, lights leak through from somewhere. That's what I told myself, but that night, lying in bed, I kept replaying the sound in my head. And then, just as I was about to drift off, I realized something. There were no other doors between mine and that unmarked one, no other rooms. Whatever made that sound was still there. Part 2. The locked door that shouldn't be locked. 2 nights later, I got home earlier than usual. The hallway felt colder, the kind of chill that makes your fingertips ache if you stand still for too long. My shoes clicked on the floor, and the sound bounced back at me from the far end, where that unmarked door waited. This time, there was no strip of candlelight underneath, just darkness. But I slowed as I passed, almost without meaning to. The metal deadbolt was turned sideways, locked tight. That's when I remembered something. A few weeks back, I'd passed a man in coveralls carrying a mop and bucket. We'd exchanged nods, and I'd glanced back to see him go into that door without even using a key. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now it bothered me. Why would a door be locked so firmly if maintenance went in and out without trouble? I crouched down, pretending to tie my shoe, and looked closer at the gap under the door. The carpet in front of it was worn, frayed, like something had been dragged across it over and over. But the hallway in my building was rarely used. There was no reason for that kind of wear. The next morning, I decided to ask the landlord. He was in the office downstairs, half buried in paperwork. I mentioned the unmarked door, said I was curious if it was storage or maybe an old laundry room. He looked up sharply, eyes narrowing in a way that told me I'd stepped somewhere I wasn't supposed to. "That door stays locked," he said flatly. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Don't worry about it." That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. A week later, as I was unlocking my apartment, I heard a sound from the far end of the hall, a faint metallic click. I turned, and in the stillness, I saw the deadbolt on that door shift, just a fraction, then snap back into place like someone had tested it from the other side. I froze, my key halfway in the lock. The hall was silent. And then came a whisper, so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Not yet. Part 3. Something standing on the other side. I avoided the far end of the hallway for days. I'd come up the stairs and head straight to my apartment without looking left. But avoiding something doesn't make it go away. It just makes it wait for you. It was close to midnight when I finally heard it again. I was lying on the couch, the TV casting a faint blue light across the room, when a single hollow knock echoed from outside. Not at my door. Farther down. I muted the TV and sat up, straining to hear. Another knock. Same rhythm. Slow. Measured. The hallway outside was dim, the overhead light flickering in slow, tired pulses. I stepped out barefoot, the floor cold under my feet. As I got closer to the unmarked door, I realized the knocks weren't coming from the hallway side. They were coming from inside. I stopped just short of the door, my heart pounding so hard it made my vision feel strange. There was no light underneath this time, just a deep, heavy black. I could smell something faint through the crack, a sharp metallic tang like wet iron. Then the sound changed. No more knocks. Instead, something moved right up to the other side. I could feel it, heat against the wood like someone's breath pushing through. The air in the hall felt wrong, too still. A shadow shifted against the gap under the door, blotting out what little darkness there was, like feet positioning themselves just inches from mine. I wanted to run. My body screamed to run, but I didn't. I leaned forward, just enough to press my ear to the wood. Silence. Then, without warning, the knob twisted. Hard. I stumbled back, heart lurching into my throat. The door shuddered once in the frame, then stopped. The deadbolt was still turned. But in that breathless moment, I understood something that made my stomach turn cold. It hadn't been locked from my side. Part 1. Moving in on a rainy afternoon. The first time I saw the building at 14th and Willow, it was raining so hard the gutters overflowed, spilling water in steady streams onto the sidewalk. I'd just signed the lease for apartment 2B, a one-bedroom that smelled faintly of old books and dust. The kind of smell that made it feel like it had been waiting for someone. My neighbours kept to themselves. An older woman across the hall who watched TV at full volume. A young couple who left for work before dawn. And at the far end of the hall, right next to the stairwell, a locked storage closet. The landlord had mentioned it offhand when I moved in. Just cleaning supplies. Don't worry about it. I didn't. At least, not at first. That first night I unpacked with the window cracked open, listening to the rain ease into a steady drizzle. The hallway outside my door stayed quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards when someone passed. Around midnight, I stepped out to toss some trash into the bin at the end of the hall. As I passed the storage closet, I noticed the doorknob glistened, tiny droplets of water clinging to the brass, even though it was dry inside the building. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone had just come in from the rain and touched it with wet hands. But as I walked back, I caught a faint noise from behind the door. Not footsteps, not the sound of something falling, more like shifting weight, slow, deliberate. I stood there for a moment, my trash bag hanging from my fingers, listening to that faint movement. It was gone almost as soon as I noticed it. When I finally closed my own door, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still standing on the other side of that closet door, waiting. Part 2. The smell behind the locked handle. It was maybe 2 weeks later when the smell started. I noticed it first on a Tuesday night, coming back from the laundromat. The hallway felt heavier somehow, the air thick like it hadn't moved in days. As I reached my door, it hit me, a sharp, sour odor that made my throat tighten. It was coming from the storage closet. I stood in front of it, my laundry bag digging into my shoulder, and tried to place the scent. Not garbage, not mold. Something sharper, almost metallic under the sourness, like rust mixed with spoiled fruit. I turned the knob out of habit, forgetting it was always locked. The handle wouldn't budge. The smell was stronger here. I could feel it clinging to my skin. I knocked. I don't know why. I just wanted to see if there was a reaction. Silence. I pressed my ear to the door. At first, nothing. Then a faint noise. Wet, muffled. The sound of something shifting against something else. The next morning, I mentioned it to the landlord. He didn't look at me when I described the smell, just shuffled papers and said, "I'll take care of it." When I asked what was inside, he replied too quickly. Cleaning supplies, mops, buckets. That night, the smell was worse. I could taste it in the back of my throat when I walked past. The air felt warmer, like there was a heat source behind the door. As I turned to leave, I heard something that made my stomach knot. A slow scrape against the inside, like metal dragged across the floor. Then a pause, and a second scrape, closer to the bottom of the door. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I locked the door twice. That night, I dreamed of the handle turning on its own. When I woke, my mouth was dry, my heart pounding, and somewhere down the hall, I swore I heard the faint click of a lock turning. Part 3. When the door opened by itself. It happened on a Friday, just after midnight. I'd been sitting at my kitchen table, half listening to the steady hum of my refrigerator, when I heard it. 3 soft knocks from somewhere down the hall. I thought it was someone visiting the old woman across from me. But the knocks came again, and this time they were slower, heavier. I stepped out, the dim hall light buzzing overhead. The smell was there again, thicker now, like it had seeped into the walls. And the storage closet door, it was open. Not wide, just a narrow gap, enough for darkness to spill into the hallway. I froze, 1 foot still inside my apartment. The doorknob hung slightly turned, as if someone had just stepped inside. I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the empty building. No answer. The air coming from the closet was warm and damp, like the inside of a closed greenhouse. My skin prickled, but my feet carried me closer. I could just make out shelves along the side walls, lined with old cleaning bottles and rusted buckets. The back of the closet, though, was wrong. It wasn't a wall, it was a door. Smaller, older, wood swollen from moisture with no handle on this side. And from behind it came a sound I'll never forget. Breathing. Slow, steady, and close. My own breath caught, and in that same instant, the inner door gave a faint, almost playful knock from the other side. I stumbled back, my shoulder hitting the hallway wall. The gap in the closet door seemed to widen just a fraction, and for a moment I thought I saw something pale move in the dark. Then, without a sound, the door swung shut. The latch clicked. By the time I reached my apartment and locked the door, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. I never saw that closet open again. But every so often, passing by late at night, I'd catch that smell and hear a faint scrape along the floor inside. Part 1. Helping a friend house sit. A friend of mine, Erin, asked me to house sit for a week while she was out of town. It was an old place. Her grandparents had built it decades ago, and it sat on the edge of a quiet street where the streetlights were far apart. The kind of neighborhood where nights were so still, you could hear the creak of your own footsteps on the sidewalk. The first night was uneventful. I fed her cat, made some tea, and settled in on the couch. She'd told me I could use any of the bedrooms, but I chose the one upstairs with a view of the yard. I didn't even go down to the basement until the second day, when I went looking for the laundry. The stairs groaned under my weight, and the air grew cooler the farther down I went. The basement was half finished. One side storage, the other side an extra bedroom that looked like it hadn't been used in years. A single bed, a nightstand, a small dresser. The walls were bare except for a single picture frame, its glass cracked. I remember stopping at the doorway. The bedroom door was closed. That in itself wasn't strange, but something about it made me hesitate. The doorknob was shiny compared to the dull wood around it, like it had been turned far more recently than anything else in the room had been touched. I reached for it, then paused. I could hear the cat upstairs, meowing at nothing. When I finally tried the knob, it didn't move, locked from the inside. I told myself Erin must have just stored some things in there. But later that night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about that closed basement room, about the smell of cold air that had slipped out from under it, even though the rest of the basement had been warm and still. And about how, when I'd first stepped onto the basement floor, I thought I'd heard a faint shuffle coming from behind that locked door. Part 2. Tapping on the inside of the door. On the third night, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain rattled the windows upstairs, and thunder shook the house in short, sharp bursts. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered into the kitchen for some water. That's when I heard it, a faint, deliberate tap from below. It was steady at first, 3 taps, a pause, then 3 again. I stood in the kitchen, the sound of the rain fading into the background. My first thought was a loose pipe, maybe shifting with the wind, but the sound was too precise, too measured. I grabbed my phone for a flashlight and headed down the basement stairs. Each step felt colder than the one before. The tapping stopped when I reached the bottom. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something metallic, sharp in my nose. The bedroom door was exactly as I'd left it, closed, locked, and ordinary. I called out, my voice low, as if not to wake someone. Silence. Then, so faint I almost missed it, came the reply, one single tap from the other side. My skin crawled. I stepped closer, pressing my ear against the wood. The sound came again, this time from lower down, as if whoever or whatever was inside had crouched near the floor. My flashlight beam caught the thin gap between the bottom of the door and the floor. It wasn't much, maybe half an inch, but enough to see the darkness beyond. That's when something moved in that gap. Not a shadow, not a trick of the light. Something pale brushed against the space for just a moment, like fingertips curling down toward the floor. I stumbled back so fast I hit the wall. My phone nearly slipped from my hand. The tapping started again, faster this time, urgent. I didn't stay to listen. I bolted up the stairs, shutting the basement door behind me. Even after I was back in bed, I could still hear it, muffled through the floorboards. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Part 3. The quiet after the final knock. By the last night of my stay, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Old houses made noises, pipes tapped, floors creaked. That's all it was. Still, I avoided the basement. I fed the cat, watched TV, tried to keep the lights on later than usual. But around 2 a.m., the power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The silence that followed felt too thick. I lit the flashlight on my phone, its narrow beam cutting through the dark. That's when I heard it again. 3 taps from below. I told myself I wouldn't go down there. I even made it as far as the couch, sat down and tried to wait it out. But then came a 4th tap, louder. By the time I reached the basement stairs, my heartbeat was loud enough that it almost drowned out the sound. Almost. The tapping stopped when I reached the bottom. The bedroom door was still closed, but this time the knob sat slightly turned, like it had been left mid-motion. I froze at the base of the door, my breath loud in my ears. The air felt wrong, too still, too cold. Then came a single, deliberate knock from the other side. It was louder than before, solid, like a signal. I stepped back, my flashlight beam shaking across the frame. I swear the wood shivered with that knock, as if something had pressed its weight against it. And then, nothing. No more tapping, no movement, not even the sound of breathing. The silence stretched on until it felt unbearable. I turned, climbed the stairs slowly, not daring to run. When I reached the top, I glanced back once. The basement door at the top of the stairs was closed. I hadn't closed it. When Erin returned the next day, I didn't tell her what happened. I only asked if she ever went into the basement bedroom. She gave me a strange look and said quietly, "There's no bedroom down there. Some stories end with a scream. These end with a door." I think about them more than I should. Quiet apartments, rain-slick hallways, basements that smell like wet iron. The moments when you stand there, your hand just inches from the knob, and realize you don't really want to know what's on the other side. Locked doors are supposed to mean safety. They're supposed to keep the outside world at a distance. But what if the danger is inside? What if the lock is just there to slow it down, not to stop it? Sometimes it's the stillness that stays with you. Not the knocks or the scraping, but the silence that follows. Like whatever was reaching for you decided, just for tonight, to let you go. And maybe that's the worst part, because if you've heard it once, you'll know it again. You'll be walking down some hallway, maybe in your own home, and your steps will slow. You'll notice a door you've passed 100 times before, but tonight it feels different. You'll think you see something move in the shadow beneath it. You'll wonder how long it's been standing there. And you'll keep walking, pretending you didn't notice. Pretending you didn't hear that faint click of the lock turning behind you.